The traffic had stopped suddenly, not because of an accident, not because of the police, but because a visibly pregnant woman stepped out of her car in the middle of the road, blocked a black luxury SUV, and shouted the name Daniel Carter so loudly that phones began to rise from every corner. Inside that car sat Evelyn Carter, a wife who still believed in her marriage. Within minutes, her life would split into a before and an after. Before this story unfolds, if you love deep African stories filled with drama, revenge, and powerful twists like this video, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. In the heart of the bustling city of Lakeside, where glass towers kissed the sky and old market women still sold pepper by the roadside, Evelyn Carter was known as a woman of calm grace. She was the kind of woman people trusted instantly. Soft-spoken, neatly dressed, always respectful. The kind of wife older women pointed at during church meetings and said, "That is how a woman should be." Evelyn had been married to Daniel Carter for 8 years. 8 years of loyalty, 0.8 years of sacrifice, 0.8 years of standing quietly behind a man the world praised loudly. Daniel Carter was celebrated everywhere. On television interviews, business magazines, award ceremonies. People called him Africa's golden mind, the man who built himself, a true hustler. And Evelyn smiled through all of it. Every morning, she woke before Daniel. She ironed his shirts herself, even when house help offered. She packed his lunch sometimes, writing short notes he rarely read. "You don't have to do all this, Evelyn," Daniel once said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "I want to," she replied gently. "We are building something together." Daniel would kiss her forehead and leave, confident, admired, adored. To the world, theirs was a stable, traditional marriage. No scandals, no noise, no cracks. But stability can be an illusion. At home, Daniel had changed. He stayed out later. He guarded his phone like a secret vault. He laughed more at messages than at his wife's jokes. Evelyn noticed. Of course she did. But she trusted him. When friends hinted, "Men like your husband attract temptations," she waved it off. "Daniel respects me," she would say calmly. "And I trust my marriage." Trust, however, is only powerful when it is not misplaced. Across town, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the same city Daniel claimed to be conquering, Lena Moore stood in front of a mirror adjusting her dress. She was younger, sharper, more restless. Lena had come to the city with dreams bigger than her suitcase. She wanted a life that sparkled, money, comfort, recognition. She was tired of struggling, tired of being invisible. And then she met Daniel. They met at a business networking event hosted by one of Daniel's partner companies. Lena worked in marketing, and Daniel had been the keynote speaker. After the event, she had approached him confidently. "Your speech was inspiring," she said, extending her hand. Daniel smiled, impressed. "Thank you. Not many people actually listen." That handshake changed everything. At first, Daniel spoke of his wife with respect. "Evelyn keeps me grounded," he told Lena over coffee. "She believes in me." Lena smiled politely, but something in her tightened. A man like this, tied down already? It annoyed her. Yet, it also made him feel valuable. The conversations continued. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into late-night calls. Late-night calls turned into secrets. Daniel began lying with ease. "I'm on a business trip," he told Evelyn. "My wife doesn't understand my pressure," he told Lena. Two women. Two versions of the same man. With Lena, Daniel felt powerful and admired. She laughed at everything he said. She made him feel young, desired, important. With Evelyn, he felt seen, too seen. She knew his weaknesses. She remembered his failures before success. And Daniel didn't want to be reminded of who he once was. The relationship with Lena became hidden but intense. He rented hotel rooms under fake names that he bought her gifts he claimed were business expenses. He promised things he had no intention of fulfilling. Lena believed him. "I want to always be second," she told him one night, resting her head on his chest. "I know," Daniel replied, staring at the ceiling. "Just be patient. Patience is easy when hope is fed." Lena started imagining a future. A public one. She pictured Daniel divorcing Evelyn quietly. She pictured herself stepping into society events, into the front seat of his life. My wife and I are complicated, Daniel once said carefully. Lena leaned closer. Then untangle it. Daniel said nothing. At home, Evelyn sensed distance growing wider. One evening, she tried to talk. Daniel, you don't look at me anymore, she said softly while serving dinner. He sighed. You're imagining things. I'm just stressed. She nodded. She always nodded, because Evelyn believed marriage was something you protected, not questioned loudly. She prayed. She waited. She trusted. While elsewhere, Daniel was creating a storm that would not stay hidden forever. Months passed. The affair deepened. Lena grew more emotionally invested, more demanding. What exactly am I to you? She asked one evening, frustration spilling over. Daniel frowned. Why are you pushing this now? Because I'm tired of hiding. Daniel didn't answer immediately. In that silence, Lena felt the first crack of doubt. Still, she stayed, because she believed men like Daniel only needed time, and because she had already given him too much of herself to walk away easily. Back at home, Evelyn prepared for their anniversary quietly. No big plans, just dinner and a small gift. Daniel forgot. He came home late, distracted, apologetic. Next week, he said, I'll make it up to you. Evelyn smiled again. What she didn't know was that her marriage, which looked solid from the outside, was already standing on borrowed time. What she didn't know was that another woman was slowly stepping closer to the life she had protected with silence. And what Daniel didn't know, yet, was that the woman he underestimated the most was his own wife. By the time Lena Moore realized she was pregnant, the affair had already crossed a line that could never be erased. She sat alone in her apartment, the pregnancy test lying on the bathroom sink like a verdict. Her hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from expectation. In her mind, this was the moment everything would finally make sense. Daniel would have no choice now. She imagined his reaction, shock first, then responsibility, maybe even courage. She imagined him standing up, telling Evelyn the truth, choosing her openly at last. That hope carried her through the night. The next day, Lena called Daniel and asked him to come over. Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart beat like a drum. Daniel arrived in the evening, still in his suit, still smelling like power and confidence. He kissed her lightly and dropped his briefcase on the couch. You sounded serious on the phone, he said. What's going on? Lena didn't smile. She reached into her drawer and brought out the test. I'm pregnant. The room went quiet. Daniel stared at the test, as though it might explode. For a long moment, he said nothing. His face drained of color, his confident posture collapsing inward. Are you sure? He asked finally. I took 3 tests, Lena replied. Daniel, this is not a mistake. He ran a hand through his hair and began pacing. This can't be happening, he muttered. This will destroy everything. Lena's heart sank. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Destroy what? She asked sharply. Your lies? Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes hard now, calculating. Listen to me carefully, he said. My wife must never find out. The words cut deep. I'm carrying your child, Lena said, her voice shaking. And that's all you can say? Daniel lowered his voice, as if the walls themselves could hear. You need to terminate the pregnancy. The room spun. What? She whispered. It's the only solution, Daniel continued quickly. I'll pay for everything. The best doctor. No one will ever know. My marriage, my reputation, everything I've built cannot be ruined by this. Lena stared at him as if she was seeing him for the first time. You promised me, she said. You said you'd leave her. Daniel avoided her eyes. I said a lot of things, he replied. But reality is different. Something broke inside Lena. So I'm nothing? She asked. Just a secret you clean up? Don't make this emotional, Daniel snapped. I'm trying to protect us both. She laughed bitterly. No, she said. You're protecting yourself. Daniel grabbed his briefcase. Think about it, he said coldly. Do what's sensible. And just like that, he walked out. Humiliation or silence. That night, Lena did not sleep. She sat on her bed, one hand resting on her stomach, anger and betrayal burning through her veins. She replayed every promise Daniel had made. Every late-night confession. Every be patient. She finally understood the truth. She had never been a choice. She had been a convenience. By morning, Lena made a decision. If Daniel thought she would disappear quietly, he had underestimated her completely. She refused to be erased. She refused to carry shame alone. And if humiliation was the price of being seen, then she would choose humiliation, public, loud, unforgettable. 2 days later, Evelyn Carter sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's black SUV as they drove through the city. Traffic was heavy. Vendors weaved between cars, horns blared, and the sun hung low and unforgiving in the sky. Evelyn stared out the window, distracted. "You've been quiet," Daniel said, adjusting the steering wheel. "Just tired," she replied. "Work has been a lot lately." Daniel nodded, relieved she wasn't probing. Then suddenly, the car jerked to a stop. Another vehicle had cut sharply in front of them, blocking the road completely. "What is this madness?" Daniel muttered angrily. Before he could react, the driver's door of the blocking car flew open. Lena stepped out. She was visibly pregnant, wearing a fitted dress that left no doubt. Her posture was straight, her face set with purpose. Daniel froze. Evelyn frowned. "Daniel," she said slowly, "do you know this woman?" Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Lena walked toward them, heels clicking against the road. Phones began to rise as passers-by sensed drama. She stopped at the front of the SUV, staring straight at Evelyn. "So this is her," Lena said loudly. "The wife." Evelyn stepped out of the car, confusion written all over her face. "Excuse me," she said. "Who are you, and why are you blocking our vehicle?" Lena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Ask your husband," she replied. "He knows me very well." The crowd grew. Daniel finally got out of the car, panic flooding his voice. "Lena, please," he whispered urgently. "Not here. Here is exactly where I want it," she snapped. She turned back to Evelyn. "Madam," Lena said, placing a hand on her stomach, "I am carrying your husband's child." The world stopped. Evelyn's face drained of color. "That's not true," she said softly, shaking her head. Daniel couldn't look at her. Lena stepped closer. "He has been sleeping with me for months," she continued loudly. "Hotels, apartments, trips he said were business. He promised to leave you." The crowd murmured. Evelyn felt her knees weaken. "Daniel," she said again, her voice barely audible. "Say something." Daniel swallowed. "Evelyn, let's talk at home," he said. Lena laughed again. "Home," she mocked. "You mean the home you protected so fiercely that you asked me to kill your child?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evelyn covered her mouth. "What did you just say?" she whispered. "He told me to terminate the pregnancy," Lena said, eyes blazing. "Because I don't deserve the front seat in his life. Because I'm just a secret." She moved closer, pointing at Evelyn. "But today, I'm taking that front seat." Daniel reached for Lena's arm. "Stop this," he hissed. She shook him off. "No," she said loudly. "You don't get to silence me anymore." Evelyn felt as though the ground beneath her had disappeared. Every lie, every late night, every dismissed doubt suddenly made sense. Her voice was calm, but it trembled. "Is it true?" she asked Daniel. "All of it." Daniel said nothing. Silence was his confession. Evelyn nodded slowly, absorbing the blow with terrifying composure. Around them, phones recorded everything. Lena straightened her shoulders. "I refuse to be hidden," she declared. "I refuse to be discarded." She turned and walked back to her car, leaving chaos behind. Daniel stood frozen, exposed. Evelyn slowly got back into the SUV, her face unreadable. The marriage that once looked unbreakable had just shattered in public. And this was only the beginning. The car ride home was quiet in a way that felt dangerous. Daniel drove with stiff hands on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road, as if looking at Evelyn might cause the car to veer off course. The city noises outside, horns shouting, movement, felt far away, like a life they no longer belonged to. Evelyn sat upright in the passenger seat, her back straight, her hands folded calmly on her lap. Too calm. Daniel stole a glance at her and felt a chill. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't asking questions. that scared him more than anything. Evelyn, he began, his voice cracking. I can explain. She turned slowly to face him. Not yet, she said quietly. Drive. Her tone was firm, controlled, unfamiliar. When they arrived at the house, Evelyn stepped out of the car without waiting for Daniel. She walked in, removed her shoes neatly, and sat down on the couch. Daniel followed, heart pounding. I made a mistake, he said quickly. I swear it meant nothing. I panicked. I never wanted to hurt you. Evelyn looked at him, truly looked at him, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. You didn't make a mistake, she said. You made a choice. Repeatedly. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand. Before you say anything else, Evelyn continued calmly. There is something you need to know. He frowned. What do you mean? Evelyn stood up. She walked toward the bookshelf and pulled out a slim, leather-bound folder Daniel had never noticed before. She returned and placed it on the table between them. You have always believed you built everything on your own, she said, that you rose from nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. Because I did. Evelyn gave a small, almost sad smile. No, Daniel. You rose because I let you. The room felt suddenly heavy. She opened the folder and slid documents across the table. Company registration papers, investment records, trust agreements. Daniel glanced at them once, then again. His breath caught. What is this? He asked. This, Evelyn said evenly, is the truth I hid for 8 years. She met his eyes. I'm the daughter of Carter Dominion Group. The words landed like a blow. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. That's not possible, he said. The Carter Dominion Group is one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, Evelyn finished. Founded by my grandfather, currently chaired by my father. Daniel's mind raced. Why would you hide something like that? He asked, his voice unsteady. Evelyn's gaze softened, but only slightly. Because I loved you, she said. Because you told me you wanted a woman, not a connection. A partner, not a sponsor. She paused. So I became invisible. Daniel sank into the chair. Memories flooded his mind. The mysterious investor who approved his first big loan. The regulatory issues that disappeared overnight. The partnerships that fell into place too easily. That was you, he whispered. My family. Evelyn corrected. At my request. Silence swallowed the room. You let the world praise you as self-made, she continued. I watched you shine and told myself your success was ours. Her voice hardened. I hid my power so you could feel like a man. Daniel felt sick. All this time, he said hoarsely, you could have said something. And what would that have changed? She asked. Would you have loved me more or resented me? He couldn't answer. The next morning, Daniel arrived at his office expecting chaos. What he didn't expect was the silence. No assistants greeted him. No cheerful chatter. His phone buzzed nonstop with missed calls, messages marked urgent. Then his secretary appeared, pale-faced. Sir, she said nervously, there's a summons. You're expected at the Carter Dominion headquarters. Immediately, Daniel's heart dropped. By the time he arrived at the towering building, his confidence was gone. He felt like an intruder in a world he had unknowingly borrowed from. Inside the boardroom sat Thomas Carter, calm, composed, and terrifying in his quiet authority. Evelyn sat beside him. Daniel swallowed hard. Sit, Thomas Carter said. Daniel obeyed. Do you know why you're here? Thomas asked. Daniel shook his head. Because you forgot who made you, Thomas said flatly. Daniel looked at Evelyn, panic rising. Sir, I didn't know. Ignorance does not cancel entitlement, Thomas interrupted. Everything you call yours exists because my daughter chose love over power. Daniel's voice trembled. I never asked for special treatment. Thomas leaned forward. You accepted it every day. A screen lit up behind them. Graphs, numbers, contracts. Your company relies on 3 major backers, Thomas continued. All of them are subsidiaries of Carter Dominion Group. Daniel felt dizzy. Your awards, your partnerships, your expansion licenses, approved because Evelyn trusted you. Evelyn finally spoke. I believed you loved me, she said quietly. Not the life my silence created. Daniel looked broken. I ruined everything, he whispered. Thomas folded his hands. You did, he agreed. And I can dismantle your empire before sunset. Daniel's breath hitched. But, Thomas continued, My daughter believes in consequences, not cruelty. He slid a document across the table. You will accept Evelyn's authority. She will hold majority control. You will sign. Daniel stared at the paper. If I refuse, he asked weakly. Thomas's gaze was cold. Then you will return to exactly where you started. With nothing. Daniel picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed. Each signature felt like a confession. Later that evening, Daniel stood alone in his office, staring at the city below. For the first time, the success around him felt hollow. He remembered Evelyn's quiet sacrifices, her patience, her belief, and he understood something too late. He hadn't just betrayed his wife. He had betrayed the very foundation of his life. Daniel whispered to himself, voice heavy with regret. I thought I was powerful. Now he knew the truth. Power had been sleeping beside him all along, and whether he would ever earn the right to stand beside it again, that was a question still unanswered. Daniel barely slept that night. The city lights outside his window blinked like accusations. Every sound felt louder, every thought heavier. By morning, his phone rang once, short, sharp, commanding. Be at Carter Dominion Group headquarters by 9 a.m., the voice said. This is not a request. The call ended. Daniel knew that voice. Thomas Carter. By the time Daniel arrived at the towering glass building, his confidence had completely drained. Security waved him through without question, but there was no warmth in their eyes. This place no longer belonged to him, not even by illusion. Inside the executive boardroom, Thomas Carter sat at the head of the long table, calm and immovable. Evelyn sat to his right, composed, elegant, unreadable. Several senior legal advisors were present, their files neatly arranged. Daniel felt small. Sit, Thomas Carter said, not looking up. Daniel obeyed. Thomas folded his hands. You have enjoyed privileges you did not earn, he began evenly. And you have disrespected the one person who made those privileges possible. Daniel swallowed hard. Sir, I take full responsibility, he said quickly. I made terrible decisions. I am willing to do whatever it takes to fix. Thomas raised a hand. This is not about fixing, he said. This is about control. The word hung in the air. Your company, Thomas continued, exists within an ecosystem you never bothered to understand. Licenses, capital flow, strategic partnerships. All roads lead back to Carter Dominion. Daniel nodded weakly. If I choose, Thomas said calmly, your empire collapses today. Stock confidence vanishes. Partners withdraw. Banks call in loans. Daniel's chest tightened. However, Thomas went on, my daughter has chosen restraint. Evelyn finally spoke. I don't want revenge, she said quietly. I want truth and accountability. Thomas slid a thick document across the table toward Daniel. You will sign over majority control of your company to Evelyn, Thomas said. She will be the final authority. You will operate under her leadership, or you will operate nowhere. Daniel stared at the document, his hands trembling. This company is my life, he whispered. Evelyn met his eyes. No, she said. It was your stage. I was the foundation. Silence filled the room. Daniel picked up the pen. Each page he signed felt like another layer of pride being stripped away. When he was done, the pen slipped from his fingers. Thomas stood. You may leave, he said. My daughter will decide what remains of you. Daniel walked out of the boardroom, not as a king, but as a man finally aware of how fragile his crown had always been. 2 days later, Evelyn requested a private meeting. Not at home, not at the office. She chose a quiet conference room overlooking the city, neutral ground. Daniel arrived first, dressed simply. No designer confidence, no performative charm, just exhaustion. When Evelyn entered, she carried no files, no documents. Only calm authority. She sat across from him. This is not a conversation about forgiveness, she began. It's about consequences. Daniel nodded. I'm listening. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. You will enter therapy, she said. Consistent, documented therapy. Not to save face, but to understand why you felt entitled to betray, lie, and destroy. Daniel hesitated. And if I refuse? Then you lose what little credibility you have left, Evelyn replied evenly. This is not punishment. It is accountability. He exhaled. I'll do it. Evelyn continued. You will publicly acknowledge my authority in the company. No more silent partner. No more illusions. Daniel nodded again. And finally, she said, you will stop trying to control narratives. She paused. The truth will exist, whether it flatters you or not. Daniel looked down. I understand. For a moment, Evelyn studied him. This man she had loved, defended, and nearly lost herself for. This is your chance to grow, she said softly. Not as a husband, as a human being. Daniel's voice cracked. I don't deserve another chance. Evelyn stood. No, she agreed. But growth isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. She turned toward the door. I'll see you at the office. Later that afternoon, Lena Moore sat in a different conference room, her posture stiff, her eyes alert. She had expected anger, threats, humiliation. What she hadn't expected was how calm Evelyn looked when she walked in. Evelyn took a seat across from her, placing a sealed envelope on the table. I won't insult you by pretending this is easy, Evelyn said. But we need clarity. Lena crossed her arms protectively over her stomach. You already have everything, she said bitterly. Why am I here? Evelyn met her gaze. Because chaos benefits no one, she replied. And secrets rot everyone involved. She slid the envelope forward. This is an NDA, Evelyn explained. You will not speak publicly about Daniel, the company, or my family. Lena scoffed. So you silence me, she said. Just like he tried to. Evelyn shook her head. No, she said calmly. I'm giving you a clean exit. Lena's eyes narrowed. What's in it for me? Freedom, Evelyn replied. No legal battles. No public dragging. No becoming a footnote in a war you can't win. Lena laughed bitterly. And money, she asked. Because he promised me everything. Evelyn's expression didn't change. You will not receive money from us, she said. Not because we lack it, but because accountability also applies to you. Lena stiffened. So, I leave with nothing? Evelyn leaned forward. You leave with your dignity, she said firmly, and the chance to rebuild your life without being tied to a man who never intended to choose you. The room fell quiet. Lena stared at the document. Her voice softened. You made me believe, she said. I thought being loud was the only way to survive. Evelyn nodded. I know, she said, but survival doesn't always require destruction. After a long pause, Lena picked up the pen and signed. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. You're stronger than I expected, she said quietly. Evelyn replied simply. I always was. Lena walked out with no money, no promises, only the heavy relief of an ending. Outside, the city continued to move. Inside, the balance of power had shifted. Truth had been chosen. Consequences had begun, and the story was far from over. Public disgrace does not arrive all at once. It comes in waves. For Daniel Carter, it began with silence. The interviews stopped. Invitations dried up. Business partners who once laughed loudly at his jokes now replied to emails with short, careful sentences, or not at all. The city still knew his name, but it spoke it differently now. At the office, Daniel sat at his desk long after everyone had gone home, staring at reports he no longer had the authority to approve alone. Every decision required Evelyn's final sign-off, and she never rushed. She asked questions. She demanded transparency. She challenged assumptions he once made freely. At first, Daniel felt humiliated, but humiliation has a way of stripping pride down to its bones. Therapy sessions forced him to confront truths he had avoided for years. Why did you think you deserved 2 lives? The therapist asked one afternoon. Daniel swallowed. Because I thought success excused me. And now I see I was hiding from accountability. For the first time in his life, Daniel was learning how to sit with discomfort without escaping into lies. At home, things were no easier. Evelyn no longer played the role of the patient, forgiving wife. She spoke plainly. She set boundaries. She did not shield him from the consequences of his actions. We are not pretending, she told him one evening. We are rebuilding, or we are walking separately. Daniel nodded. Understand, he said quietly, and I'm prepared for either outcome. That was new, and Evelyn noticed. News outlets began whispering. Not everything was exposed, but enough cracks showed for the illusion to collapse. Analysts questioned Daniel's leadership. Commentators noted the sudden emergence of Evelyn Carter as majority controller. Some called it scandal. Others called it correction. Inside the company, changes were swift. Unethical contracts were reviewed. Questionable practices were dismantled. Employees who had been silenced before were suddenly heard. Daniel felt the weight of what he had built and what it had cost others. One afternoon, he stood in the hallway watching Evelyn address senior staff. She spoke clearly, confidently, without aggression. And Daniel understood something painful and profound. She had always been this powerful. He had simply been too busy protecting his ego to notice. That realization stayed with him long after the room emptied. Months passed. The public storm settled into a cautious calm. Daniel was no longer celebrated, but he wasn't erased either. He worked. He learned. He showed up without demanding applause. Evelyn, meanwhile, stepped fully into her place. She attended board meetings openly. She was interviewed, not as a wife, but as a leader. Her name stood on documents, not behind them. At a corporate summit, someone asked her directly, "How does it feel to finally be acknowledged?" Evelyn smiled politely. "I was always acknowledged," she said, "just not publicly." The room went quiet. Daniel watched from the side, something like respect, earned, not assumed, settling in his chest. When Evelyn and Daniel appeared together again, it was intentional. No grand announcements, no dramatic declarations, just presence. They walked into a charity gala hand in hand, not as a perfect couple, but as partners aware of the cost of illusion. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed. But Evelyn stood tall. Daniel did not lead. He walked beside her. When asked about their marriage, Evelyn answered calmly. "We are choosing honesty over comfort," she said. "That is not easy, but it is real." Daniel added only one sentence. "I'm learning to earn respect instead of assuming it." That single statement traveled far. Some praised him, some doubted him, and some waited for him to fail again. Daniel accepted all of it. What remained? At home that night, the house was quiet. Evelyn sat by the window, reading. Daniel stood nearby, unsure whether to speak. Finally, he said softly, "Thank you for not destroying me when you could have." Evelyn closed her book. "This was never about destruction," she replied. "It was about truth." She looked at him. "Whether we last or not depends on who you choose to become from here." Daniel nodded. "Then I'll choose better," he said. Every day, Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She didn't promise forgiveness. She didn't promise permanence. But she stayed. And for now, that was enough. In the end, Daniel Carter lost the fantasy that had protected him. And Evelyn Carter reclaimed the truth she had buried for love. Their story was no longer about betrayal alone. It was about power revealed, about accountability embraced, about a woman who stepped out of the shadows, and a man who finally learned that love without respect is just another lie. The empire remained, but this time it stood on honesty, and that made all the difference.